The Canadian government is proposing a plan to cut emissions from fertilizer use in agriculture by 30% by 2030. Farmers warn that it will come at the cost of grain production in Canada as the world is scrambling to find supplies. But in other parts of the world, farmers are also at odds with the government, igniting protests and calls for change. Here's John Phipps.
As if record-breaking heat wasn't enough to trigger tempers, Europe, and especially the Netherlands, have been dealing with an increasingly incendiary political situation, pitting the nation's farmers against EU government plans to decrease greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030. The major target is nitrous oxides, of which agriculture contributes about half. But Dutch farmers, who are an ag exporting power behind only the U.S., contend those efforts will force many producers out of business, perhaps as many as 30%, and that could be conservative. Protests, which began 3 years ago, have intensified, with tractor blockades of major roads and city centers. In addition, farmers are demanding more positive media coverage and, predictably, more government aid. They are also pointing fingers of blame at other EU countries and home companies like Shell and Tata Steel. Unusually for Europe, a few shots have been fired by police at protesters, but most of the demonstrations were relatively orderly, if angry. All this resentment and outrage by farmers faces two formidable hurdles to resolution. The first is the Common Agricultural Policy, whose large subsidies to agriculture has made them essentially dependent on them. Now add in the series of heat waves which have been scorching the continent with growing frequency over the last 2 decades, and is now setting all-time records this summer across Europe. With environmental political parties like the Greens possessing considerable clout and not enough air conditioning, public opinion has not been overwhelmingly sympathetic to farmers. Dutch farmers are noted for their professional and business skill, but due to their intense management, the carrying capacity for livestock like dairy cows, in their country at least, has likely been met or maybe even exceeded. That's why you see Dutch immigrants operating all over the world, including the U.S. While the Dutch protests have attracted the most attention, the EU emissions proposals threaten farmers across the bloc. Given the economics and politics of this debate, however, a difficult transition for producers seems inevitable.
Thanks, John. And you can watch more of John's commentary on our YouTube page. All right, when we come back, we check in with Machinery Pete, who has this week's Tractor Tales.